Okay, I'm going to get started by welcoming everyone. Welcome to Wat Tung Yu. Nice to see everyone here this morning. Welcome to everyone who's joining online as well. Today is our group learning program where each Sunday I come together with students, helping you guys to understand a chapter in this book that's titled Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This is our course text for this particular program, where each Sunday I'm guiding students to be able to understand all the foundational teachings that it takes to be able to help you move your mind to enlightenment, where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you'll no longer experience any discontent feelings. You won't be experiencing anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All these feelings and others are eliminated from the mind through training of the mind. So we're going to start out with a meditation session to be able to help you guys understand some of the teachings of the Buddha. But there's more than just meditation that you would need in order to be able to move your mind to this enlightened mental state. So after our meditation, I'm going to be sharing a talk on chapter 20. That's the chapter that we're in today, which is titled Animal to Human, the Evolution of Our Consciousness. This is where you learn about how, as a human being, you've most likely been animals in many times in the past. And what you're doing on this path to enlightenment is you're making your way to becoming this better and better human being. Because the unenlightened mind in the human existence functions very much like an animal. But we're not animals, we're human beings. And we can shed those animalistic instincts, becoming a better and better human being, purifying the mind. That's what essentially the path to enlightenment is becoming a better and better human being. So by understanding this evolution of your consciousness, it'll help you to more easily focus on what it is you need to focus on to be able to train your mind. So we're going to be discussing that after our meditation. If you'd like to join for the meditation, the way that I start this is with some chanting. This will help ease the mind into the meditation. And I see many of you guys have the chanting sheets. Somebody put them here in the middle of the floor. They're also over there on the cabinet. If you need a chanting sheet, you're welcome to chant along. And for those of you guys that are at home, you can actually get these chanting sheets by going to our website, buddhadailywisdom.com, and you click on free books and then scroll down towards the bottom and you'll be able to see this daily chanting sheet there. The chants were used during the lifetime of the Buddha as a way to commit the teachings to memory. Every 2 weeks, the students would come together and they would recite his teachings orally. This is the way that they remembered the teachings. That nowadays we use books, audiobooks, videos, podcasts, things like this to be able to study the teachings and commit them to memory. But 2,500 years ago, those things didn't exist. So they used chanting or reciting the teachings as a way to commit the teachings to memory. So you can see from the origins of chanting that this isn't a rite, ritual, ceremony, worship, or prayer, or anything like that. If you've been exposed to any of those kinds of things related to the teachings of the Buddha, those aren't the teachings of the Buddha. He never taught any rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, or prayer. So I use these chants as a way to help ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself, because we don't need to chant in order to remember the teachings anymore, because we have books and audiobooks and all those other things. So if you like to chant along, you're going to see that you get more benefit as you ease down into the meditation. If you read the English translations of the chants, you're going to see a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for the Buddha. And because of this, I don't think the Buddha even created these chants, because a Buddha wouldn't walk around and say, here, chant these chants to me out of respect for me. This would be ego or arrogance if someone did that. And a person who's gotten to enlightenment, they don't have ego or arrogance. They would have eliminated that out of their mind. So I suspect these were created by his students, either during his life or after his death, because if you learn from a teacher how to move from anger, sadness, frustration, and all those other discontent feelings to the peace and joy that is the enlightened mental state, and this teacher didn't want anything from you or expect anything from you, you might actually have a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for that person too. So that's where I suspect these chants actually came from. So we're going to do these on the way into meditation and on the way out as well. Once we get into the meditation, you're going to hear me providing you guidance, where I'm essentially going to be instructing you how to meditate while we're actually meditating together. Then there's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet and we're all meditating at the same time. Everyone here at the temple and anyone who's joining online will just be meditating. Now, during that period of time of quietness, I'm sure you're going to hear occasional sounds. You might hear a car going by, a dog barking, a bird chirping, someone here might cough or sneeze or something like this. If you're in meditation with a craving for permanent silence, when you hear a sound, you'll cause your mind to be frustrated or annoyed. The mind itself is causing these feelings. That's why you can actually eliminate them. It's not the outside world that's causing you to be angry or frustrated or irritated or annoyed. It's actually coming from within your own mind. That's why you can actually train the mind to get to a point where you don't experience these feelings anymore. So what the unenlightened mind does is it craves permanence while you live in an impermanent world. Everything around you is constantly changing, but the mind craves for things, wants things, expects things to be a certain way. And when the mind doesn't get what it wants, it gets those painful feelings. So if you're in meditation with a craving for permanent silence, when you hear a sound, you'll be frustrated or annoyed, but that's your mind causing that itself. You need to be able to understand that these sounds are going to arise, they're going to change, and they're going to fade away. This is the world functioning exactly the way it was intended to function. So you can be at ease and be peaceful while you're in meditation, just understanding that this is the way the world works, is that it's impermanent. And you will hear occasional sounds during meditation. You're not going to be able to be in an environment where it's permanently quiet. After that period of time of quietness, we're going to come out of that with some more chanting. And that's where I'll start today's class, helping you guys to understand this evolution of our consciousness from the animal realm to the human realm. In terms of your body position for meditation, there's 4 positions that the Buddha taught: seated, lying, standing, and walking. And you would learn these different positions at different times as part of your journey to enlightenment. It's kind of like having a tool belt and using these different tools at different times. And I teach these in the various courses and retreats that I share. But usually when people are just starting out, they're starting out in the seated position. So I'll give you guys some guidance on this to be able to help you find something that's maybe even more comfortable than you're already experiencing. You can sit however you like. There's not just one way to sit, because that would be permanence, and we live in an impermanent world. All of our bodies are different, and we're going to find different things to be comfortable. So you sit however you like. Even if it's not something that I've taught, you can sit however you like. It's up to you to find whatever is comfortable. But you might consider these things as recommendations or things for you to think about that could potentially help you. And if there's something here that can help you, feel free to use it. But it's important that your body's not painful and it's not luxurious, but instead it's in the middle where there's comfort. So if you're on the floor, in a chair, in a bench or sofa or a wheelchair, you can sit in all these different ways. Again, there's not just one way to sit. If you're on the floor, you might have some cushions under your rear. This will kind of help soften your seat a bit. And if you're going to bring your legs together in the cross-leg position, you might just choose to do that lightly. Whereas if they're real tight, it can impede the circulation and cause pain in the lower body. Sometimes people like to put their legs off the mat. This will get your hips up in the air, and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles, allowing the circulation to flow. So this is an option for you as well. The Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. But again, it's not about everyone doing it exactly the same way. If this is comfortable for you, you could use it, but there's other options here as well. Some people like to put their palms on their thighs or their knees, their palms up, or you might even rest your hands comfortably in your lap. So you can put your hands and arms wherever you like. And then for anybody who's in a chair, on a bench, or a sofa, in a wheelchair, it's the same thing. You can sit however you like. Sometimes people put their feet flat on the floor or lightly crossed at the ankles, but you can see me sitting in a chair here with my legs crossed. So this is an option for you as well. And then you can put your hands and arms wherever you like. In terms of your upper body, it's helpful if this is erect with your sternum up and your shoulders back. This will help keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation, because this is a dedicated, active, purposeful training session where you're eliminating certain unwholesome qualities from the mind and you're cultivating certain wholesome qualities in the mind. So you'd like the mind to be attentive and alert during the meditation. And having your sternum up and your shoulders back will help you to do that. Whereas if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be dull or lethargic. But if you were real rigid, the mind could be overactive or uptight. So you'd like the upper body to be in the middle with the sternum up and the shoulders back, because not only will it keep your mind attentive and alert during the meditation, but it'll help you to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose more easily. So again, I'm going to do the chanting to ease it into meditation. You guys are welcome to join, and then I'll come back in with the guidance afterwards. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Bhutang Mahakavanang Apivateyami สวากขาโตมหาเกวตาตัมโมดามังนามาสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเกวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหะเกวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสขะโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสตาตาวามนุสนังปุโตภะคะวะติ Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหะเขวาโพตังมหาเขวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเขวตาธัมโมดามังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเขวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินับโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหะเขวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสรังปุโตภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation, again, I'd like to welcome all of you guys. Good morning. Welcome to Wat Tung Yu. Welcome to everyone online who's joining as well. Today is our group learning program where I'm going to be helping you to understand this topic from chapter 20, which is titled Animal to Human, the Evolution of Our Consciousness. This is going to help you to be able to understand your past existences, the 5 realms of existence, and help you to understand what you're doing on the path to enlightenment, which is shedding all these animalistic instincts. All the teachings of the Buddha, they're independently verifiable. What I'm going to be sharing with you today isn't anything that you should believe. There's no belief in the teachings of the Buddha. So you're not believing, and hoping something good happens when you die. You're actually learning, growing, and developing in this life to be able to train your mind to make your way to this enlightened mental state. And everything the Buddha teaches you is to be able to focus on training your mind and eliminate what's called the 10 fetters. There's 10 individual pollutions that the Buddha discovered in the mind, and then he figured out the tools and techniques of how to eliminate them out of the mind. And then having done so, you'll notice that the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, that the mind no longer experiences any discontent feelings, that you will have eliminated all your anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. By eliminating these pollutions out of the mind, you'll notice that the mind performs optimally, that it'll be focused, you'll have concentration, clarity, and deep memory. You'll notice that your personal and professional relationships are really blossoming, that you don't have that bitterness and harshness and hostility in your mind any longer. You'll notice that you're not even in a bad mood, that it's physically impossible for you to experience a bad mood. All your relationships will be harmonious, that you won't have disharmony throughout your relationships. So it's coming through purifying your mind of these 10 fetters or 10 pollutions. They're referred to as fetters because during the lifetime of the Buddha, if you were someone that they were trying to keep confined to a certain area, like a prisoner, they would attach a fetter around your ankle. This was a shackle and a chain and a ball. And then they would just keep you in an open field, and people would basically hang out in that area because they couldn't go anywhere because they had this fetter on their ankle. So just like a prisoner, that if you release this fetter off the ankle, now the individual is free. The same thing is true about your mind. When you eliminate these 10 fetters out of the mind is now free. It's no longer bound up, experiencing this anger and frustration and all these other discontent feelings. So what I'm going to do first to help you understand this topic is to understand just a little bit of the problems that the Buddha discovered. As different parts of our program, I help you to deeply understand all these individual fetters and the pollutions of the mind. But in terms of how it relates to this particular topic of the evolution of one's consciousness, I'm going to just target a few of the things that the Buddha taught in this regard about the pollutions of the mind. While the 10 fetters is the deepest level of detail that the Buddha describes about the pollutions of the mind, he also describes this higher level way of understanding these pollutions. It's referred to as the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots or the 3 fires. And this is a high level way to talk about these 10 fetters. What this is craving, anger, and ignorance, or sometimes people refer to it as desire, hatred, or confusion. The way that I describe this is craving, anger, and ignorance, because I found this is the best way to describe it to students. But other people use things like greed, hatred, and delusion, or things like this. What craving is the way that the mind longs and yearns, chases after the objects of its affection, trying to seek satisfaction outside of yourself, thinking that some external thing is going to provide lasting satisfaction. So the mind will chase it and chase it and chase it and chase it. The mind might think that, oh, it's more money that's going to make me happy. Let me chase that for a while. And if you chase money for a while and eventually you get the money, now you'll be happy and excited. You'll get pleasant feelings. But those are conditional feelings. Those feelings will fade away. And if you don't get what you want, you'll get angry or frustrated or agitated or annoyed. The mind is craving permanence. It has wants and expectations. The mind thinks that the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction. So it chases it and chases it and chases it. It's kind of like the mind thinks, what do I need to feel better here? Maybe a new boyfriend or girlfriend, that'll fix everything. Let me chase one of those for a while. Let me try to get one of those. And now you might chase that for a while. And if you get a boyfriend or girlfriend, you might be happy. But then over time, this relationship falls apart and you get angry and frustrated all over again, right? Or you might look outside and see that it's sunny and you're like, wow, it's so sunny. I'm so happy and excited. But then when it rains, you get sad or frustrated or angry. That's because the mind is basing its inner feelings on some external thing. And these external things are not permanent. So if you base your inner feeling of happiness on something like the sun, well, as soon as that changes to rain, you'll be agitated and frustrated or annoyed. But the only thing that's happened there is change. That's all that's happened. The mind is craving permanence while it lives in an impermanent world. So if you get really happy when your bank account balance is up here, when it goes down here, you'll be sad or frustrated or annoyed. Again, the only thing that's happened here is change. But because of the mind's craving and longing, yearning, it wants things to be a certain way. It expects things to be a certain way. And it can only be happy when it gets things that way. But because you live in an impermanent world, you can't always get things your way. It's just not possible. So when this anger is arising, this frustration is arising because the mind's not getting what it wants, the mind becomes unskillful, where it'll tend to push people away or it'll push a situation away. You might have pushed away your friends or family, thinking that that's going to solve your problem. But you can see that that didn't solve your problem because you still get annoyed, you still get frustrated, you still get agitated. Because if this person was the true cause of your problem, when you push them away, you'd be peaceful and joyful from that point forward. That person isn't what's causing you to be angry or frustrated. It's your craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning, the wanting things to be a certain way. And you can only be happy when you get things your way. So when the mind's not getting what it wants and that anger is coming up, the mind falsely thinks that the problem is external. So it will tend to push people away or it'll push a situation away. Or you might become bitter and harsh and hostile towards people through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. It's almost like an animal growling and roaring at another animal. It's like, do things my way. This is what the mind's doing in the unenlightened state. Even though you're a human being, the mind is functioning very much like an animal. It's growling and roaring at other beings, trying to fear them into doing things your way, speaking harsh and bitter and hostile. But this doesn't work because these people end up choosing to leave out of your life because they're not interested in being around the bitterness and harshness and hostility. But even if this person sticks around for a little bit, then their mind understands that you've been bitter and harsh and hostile. They might have some fear in their mind, and they might even start being bitter and harsh and hostile back to you. So this doesn't create harmony in your life. It just creates disharmony. And you can't live with all beings harmoniously by going around being bitter and harsh and hostile to them. This is the mind trying to get its cravings fulfilled. The mind thinks if I can just get things my way, everything will be perfect. So that's where it's bitter and harsh and hostile to people. Or the third thing that the mind will do when these cravings aren't getting fulfilled and the anger and the frustration is arising, thinking that it's something external, is you might put your expectations on people and try to control them and pressure them into doing things your way. And once again, people don't like this. They feel pressured and controlled, so they choose to leave out of your life. So as long as you continue to have craving in your mind, this anger is going to arise. And as that anger is arising, you might push people away, be bitter, harsh, and hostile to them, or put your expectations on them and try to control them. And where this is all coming from is this third one that oftentimes people refer to it as ignorance or delusion. I use the phrase unknowing of true reality because the word ignorance is like a derogatory word, and the Buddha wouldn't have used that word because remember, we're translating from what the Buddha shared during his lifetime to English because he didn't speak English during his lifetime, right? So the word ignorance is derogatory and degrading and diminishing, and the Buddha wouldn't have used that word, but a lot of other teachers use it. So that's why I have it here so that you'll understand what I'm talking about. But a better way to understand this is confusion or misunderstanding, the lack of wisdom, the unknowing of true reality. Because the mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand, it continues to believe the problem is external. So the mind continues to push people away, be bitter, harsh, and hostile, and put expectations on people and try to control them. So as long as there's this lack of wisdom or this unknowing of true reality in the mind, this confusion, then the mind will continue to crave, longing, yearning for things, only being happy when you get what you want, but then being angry or frustrated, irritated when the mind's not getting what it wants, getting these painful feelings. So that's why none of the teachings of the Buddha are based in belief, because in order to be able to transform this and get it out of your mind, you need to get to wisdom. You can't get to enlightenment through belief, because with belief, you don't know it's true or false. You're just believing it because somebody convinced you to believe it, or you convinced yourself to believe it. You need to get to wisdom where you can see the truth for yourself. So don't believe what it is that I'm sharing with you here today, or anything you read in the books that I write, or any of the other classes that you share and you learn from other people. Don't believe any of the teachings. You need to be able to learn, examine, and investigate the teachings, reflect on them to independently verify them, and practice them. By practicing the teachings and integrating them into your day-to-day life, you'll uproot these pollutions, and that's what's actually going to produce the enlightened mental state. So you can look at this and you can see when you're angry and you're frustrated or irritated, there's something you're craving. You're longing, yearning for something. And if you will get what you want, you get happy. But if you don't get what you want, you get angry or sad or frustrated. You can look at a recent situation where you've been angry or frustrated, and you can peer into it, and you'll be able to see that your mind was having craving, desire, attachment. And if you can't see that, when we get to the question period, because I'm going to open up for questions at different times during this talk, you'll be able to ask questions and get the help that you need. So this craving, anger, and ignorance is in the mind. These pollutions are in there, motivating this unskillful conduct where an individual is very much functioning like an animal. What animals do with craving is they will tend to hoard things like their food. They don't want to share with others. They will hoard things. Or maybe like their territory. They will mark out their territory. And now when they mark out their territory, if another animal comes into their territory, they will start growling and roaring. Right? Human beings do the same thing. They will put a fence around their house. And now when somebody gets close to their house, hey, what are you doing? You're on my land. Whoa, get off of there, right? This is the mind acting very much like an animal, right? So we're functioning in the unenlightened state as a human being very much like an animal because we've had these countless animal existences in the past. And now being in this human existence, the mind still has those pollutions. So what you're doing on this path to enlightenment is you're shedding that, becoming a better and better human being, which we'll talk about a little bit more here in a moment. But let's understand more of the problem, because it's these three poisons or these three pollutions, these three unwholesome roots or defilements or taints or these fires. The Buddha describes them in more detail in the 10 fetters, and one of the ones that he describes is something called personal existence view, and then another one is called conceit. These are very predominant in the animal existences, and they're also in the human mind as well. What personal existence view is where the mind is clinging to this body, or the mind thinking that this is who you are. The mind will cling to your self-image, for example, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. So if you've ever spilt something on your clothing and you were embarrassed by that, that's your personal existence view. The mind's clinging to this self-image, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And if you're being perceived the way you want to be perceived, you'll be happy and excited. You'll have pleasant feelings about that. But if you're not being perceived by the way others, the way you want them to perceive you, you'll have painful feelings, like embarrassment can come into the mind. If you've ever been in front of your closet and you've thought about, who am I going to see today? And how do I want to look? And you put on some clothes and maybe you looked in the mirror and you're like, no, that's not how I want to look. And then you put on some other clothes, you're like, no, that's not how I want to look. And you put on some other clothes, you're like, okay, now this is how I want to look, right? And now you go out into the world with those clothing on, and you can't feel comfortable unless you look the way you want to look. This is the mind clinging to the body, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. Or if you've ever looked in the mirror and you saw a wrinkle or a pimple or a mole or a gray hair or something like this, or you started losing your hair and you were shaken up by that, this is your personal existence view, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And you can only feel comfortable when you're being perceived that way. When I was a child, I used to get out the gel and the mousse and I would run it through my hair before going to school, trying to get every little hair in the right spot. And I couldn't feel comfortable going to school unless every little hair was in exactly the right spot, right? And sometimes I did this for so long, I would miss the school bus on the way to school, right? So this is the personal existence view. This is the mind clinging to this body, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And this body is not you. This isn't who you are. But in the animal realm, we needed this personal existence view. If we didn't have this personal existence view, we wouldn't have been able to survive. Because if we were a deer, for example, in an open field, and there was a predator on the edge of the woods peering into this open field where we're grazing and eating grass, we needed to know, oh my goodness, here comes a tiger, here comes a lion or whatever it is. We need to run, and we would run and get away from this lion or this tiger. But we don't need that in this human realm. We don't need this personal existence view because it's just causing you to experience things like embarrassment and frustration and anger and all these other discontent feelings. And when you have those discontent feelings coming up into the mind, now you can't make wise decisions, because when fear comes into your mind's all shaken up, and now you can't make wise decisions to experience a better result. So you don't need this fear to understand that this situation is unwise and I shouldn't be here. Let me make some wise decisions to leave. But as an animal, we don't have that level of consciousness to be able to cultivate that level of wisdom, to be able to know, oh my goodness, that's a lion, let me leave. An animal is functioning based in their fear, but oftentimes they make unwise decisions, and this is what happens in the animal world. They end up getting killed and eaten by this lion, right? Whereas human beings, we understand, oh, it's very unwise to go around this lion. Let me stay as far away as possible from that being, right? Because our mind is more developed. But we still have this personal existence view in the mind to a certain degree because we had it when we were animals. And now coming into this human world, the mind continues to retain that. Same thing with this conceit, is the mind has what's called conceit. This is the arrogance, the pride, the measuring and comparing, thinking that you're above somebody and looking down on them, or putting yourself below people and looking up to them with such awe and admiration. This is the mind wanting a pecking order. Maybe you go into a social situation, you go to a party, and someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, what do you do?" And you're like, "Oh, I'm a lawyer." And they're like, "Well, I'm a doctor," right? And now there's this measuring and comparing of who's better and who's worse, right? There's this pecking order that the mind's looking for. Where in the animal realm, we needed that pecking order, but in the human realm, we don't need it. In the animal realm, if we didn't know who was above us and who was below us, we wouldn't have been able to survive as animals. Because when we were a pack of wolves, we needed to know who's the alpha male and who's the alpha female, because they're going to teach us how to hunt. They're going to teach us how to survive. When we were a herd of elephants, we needed to know who's the matriarch of our herd, because she's going to show us where the food is. She's going to show us where the watering holes are. She's going to show us where the migration paths are. She was helping us to understand how to be a better elephant so that now we could survive in this world. Whereas if we were just roaming and wandering in the forest as a lone elephant, we would have found it very difficult to survive. So in the animal realm, we needed this strong pecking order to know who was above us and who was below us so that we could actually survive. But in this human world, we don't need that. When we go into a situation where there's a lot of people and someone's trying to put themselves above you and they're looking down on you and they're talking down to you, you don't like that. And it's like, I don't want to be around this person, right? But also if you put yourself below people and you look up to people with such awe and admiration, your mind's shaken up. You might go into your boss's office and you think that they're so much above you, and now you're shaken up and you have difficulties talking to them. And now in your profession, you find it difficult to advance in your profession because when your mind is all shaken up like that, your boss doesn't have confidence that you're doing a good job, and now you don't get promoted in the same way as if you were calm and steady and stable and you could make wise decisions and communicate with your boss wisely. So when you have this conceit in your mind, if you put yourself above people, in some situations, you're going to put yourself below people. So as long as you have this conceit in your mind, you're going to be measuring and comparing and trying to figure out if you're above people or below people. And again, where this is all coming from is that our mind has been conditioned in our animal existences to think this way. And our mind retains this as we come into the human world. Our mind develops that more and more and more. And now we have this pecking order in the mind, constantly trying to figure out who's above us and who's below us. And now when you're talking to people who you think are below you, you talk to them in one way. You talk down to them. But then when you talk to people who are above you and you want something to them, you talk to them in a different way. And your mind almost short circuits if you're around these people at the same time, because you're constantly having to figure out who's above you and who's below you. And now you're talking to this group of people in one way and this group of people in another way, and your mind can't be peaceful and joyful in that situation. So there's a solution for this. This is what we refer to as personal existence view and conceit. These are two of the pollutions that you can see are very clearly from the animal realm. And there's others as well, but these are just two that we're going to talk about here today. This is what we refer to as the ego. Your current life in your previous lives conditioned the mind to think in a certain way. The mind has been conditioned to think in a certain way. And now through those various experiences in our animal life and in this life, our mind thinks in a certain way. Now we function in a certain way, and we can't live harmoniously with all the beings around us because of these pollutions that are in the mind, and the mind being conditioned in that way. There's this cycle of rebirth, which is this continuous rebirth over and over and over and over again. As long as a being is born, they're going to experience sickness, aging, death, loss, sorrow, and despair. They're going to experience displeasure, right? As long as there's birth, you're going to experience sickness, aging, and death, sorrow, grief, pain, and displeasure. This is going to happen. But by the time you get to enlightenment, these things don't bother you any longer. Right now, if you're sick, you might be angry or frustrated or irritated or annoyed. Or if you're noticing that you're aging and you're noticing wrinkles and gray hair and getting extra fat, that might bother the mind. You might be frustrated or agitated by that. Or when you get close to death, you might find that to be very painful for you. And the same thing is true about the people who are around you. When you see your parents or your siblings or your life partner or your children, if you see them being sick or you see them aging, or you see them getting close to death, you might find this to be very problematic within your own mind. What the mind's doing here is it's craving permanence, wanting things to be permanent when you live in an impermanent world, that this body can't be permanently healthy. Your parents can't be permanently healthy. It's not possible. They are going to experience sickness, aging, and death, just like you. But if your mind craves permanent health, when you're sick, you will struggle with that because you live in an impermanent world, but yet the mind's craving permanence. If you're craving permanent youthfulness, when you experience aging of this body, your mind will really struggle with that because it's craving permanence when this body is not permanent. Or if you're craving permanent life, as you're getting close to death, you will have difficulties with that. You'll have fear and painful feelings as a result. So each individual being that is in existence is in this continuous cycle of being born over and over and over and over and over again. And because of birth, they experience sickness, aging, death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. But there's an escape out of this, and that's the path to enlightenment. And getting to enlightenment is to purify the mind of these pollutions so that the mind no longer experiences the difficulties and struggles of the anger and sadness and the guilt and shame and fear, and the stress, anxiety, and all these other discontent feelings. So I'm going to talk about that and how to shed this to a certain degree after I talk about what's called the 5 realms of existence. I'm going to help you to understand these 5 realms and this whole cycle of rebirth. This is like an introduction to helping students to understand this. Now, if this is the first time you've been learning with me, which I can see many of you guys are here for the first time, this isn't something that someone usually learns as they first start on the path to enlightenment. There's core central teachings that you need to be able to learn and understand before someone makes their way into understanding the cycle of rebirth. That's why this is chapter 20 in this first book, because it's an introduction to the cycle of rebirth. But what I do for students is when they first get started on the path to enlightenment, I suggest that they set aside the cycle of rebirth. That is not something to learn right up front. That here, even at the beginning of someone's journey, because typically by the time someone gets to this point, they've been learning with me for about 6 months or so, I suggest to people to set aside the cycle of rebirth, because what's happened in the past, it's in the past. It doesn't matter anymore. And what may or may not happen in the future, it's in the future. It doesn't matter anymore. But as part of your journey to enlightenment, you will need to understand the cycle of rebirth and independently verify it. Don't believe in the things that I'm going to share with you right here. There's not a way for me right now to give you exactly how to independently verify this, but by the time you get to volume 11, chapter 105 of our book series, there's 17 different criteria that I share with you of how to independently verify what I'm sharing with you as part of the cycle of rebirth. Because you're going to need to verify this. You're going to need to be able to see it for yourself. For some people, they've had experiences and they do know that these things are true. For other people, they haven't had experiences and they don't know that these things are true. But just give you a couple of little tiny things that you can see. Perhaps if you've had these types of experiences, you can see that the cycle of rebirth is true. Because right now you might be believing that you only have one life. You don't have any evidence that you only have one life. The only thing is that right now, at this moment, you can't remember your previous lives, perhaps. But as you start learning and growing and developing on this path and you're eliminating the pollution out of your mind, there's the potential that you'll have observations of your past lives. You'll start being able to recall your past lives. And if you didn't understand that those were past memories, you could be really shaken up by that. So, for example, in this life, if you started having vivid memories of being murdered in a past life, this is something that keeps coming to your mind. If you didn't understand that that was your past lives, it could really shake you up in this life. So if you understand that those memories that you're having of being murdered, because you know you weren't murdered in this life, right? If you understand that those are from a past life, you can just set them aside and ignore them, right? Or sometimes people experience communication from these beings in all these other realms, because oftentimes people think of the hell realm as being deep down into the core of the earth, or the heavenly realm being far up in the sky. But in reality, these beings that I'm going to be describing to you, they're all here in the same time and space as us. Just like a human being is sitting here in this chair, if I got up and left and an animal came in and sat here, we're all in the same time and space. So these beings of hell, the ghosts that are in afflicted spirit realm, the heavenly beings, we're all in the same time and space. And there's some people that can actually see these beings. But if you didn't understand that that is true reality, you could think that you're actually going crazy. Or if you started experiencing communication from these beings, because some people can actually hear these beings speaking. And you can get to a point where, just like if you were in a restaurant and 2 tables over, somebody was talking really loud and you can ignore that. It's the same thing with these beings, that if you hear these beings talking, you can train your mind to actually ignore it. But if you didn't understand that these things are true, and this is how the world truly works, you could think you're going crazy. So what the Buddha did is he taught you how the world truly works. He didn't give you rules and commandments of, if everybody follows these rules and commandments, the world will become a peaceful place. The reason why the mind is struggling is because of that lack of wisdom. That's why it has the stress and anxiety and frustration, is because it's living in a world that it doesn't understand. So that's why the mind has stress and anxiety, because it's struggling, because it's living in a world that it doesn't understand. So the Buddha is sharing with you how the world truly is, so that now when you understand how the world truly is, you can navigate this world more peacefully. So understanding these 5 realms of existence should never be believed. And it's usually something that people set aside at the beginning of their journey in the path to enlightenment, because there's core central teachings that you need to learn and practice in order to be able to get really started on the path to enlightenment. But here in this program, in chapter 20, we're usually about 6 months into the program at this point, I introduce students to the cycle of rebirth, because by this point, they're starting to train their mind, and they could start having some of these experiences where they start either seeing these beings or hearing these beings. If you've ever experienced something that we refer to as deja vu, I don't know if you're familiar with that term. What deja vu is where you're in a certain situation right now, and it feels so utterly familiar to you, but you know that that hasn't happened in this life. You know that you've never even been to this place ever in this life, but yet it feels so familiar for you when you're in that situation. We call that deja vu. What that is that's the residual memories of your previous lives bubbling up to the surface of your mind. And typically what people do is they have that experience for 5 seconds or 10 seconds, and they push it aside and they just forget about it. This is actually evidence to be able to help you see that you've had existences in the past. And there's other ways for you to independently verify that you have had existences in the past. So in volume 11, chapter 105, it has 17 different ways for you to independently verify the cycle of rebirth. But it's in volume 11, chapter 105 for a reason, because by that point, someone's usually been studying with me for 1.5 to 2 years by the time they get to that point. And they're focused on developing the core central teachings and all the other teachings up to that point. But here I'm just going to introduce you to these 5 realms so that you can be aware of them and what transpires in these realms. Because you've been in these different realms at different times in your previous existences. And you may or may not remember that at this point, but there's the potential for you to remember that at some point during this life. And as you're doing that and you experience that, you don't need to be shaken up by that. You can understand that it's completely normal. So this first one is called the heavenly realm. This is a realm where beings are what we call formless. They don't have physical form. Human beings, we have physical form, but the beings in the heavenly realm, they don't have physical form, but some people can see them. It's almost like an apparition, right? Where it may be like a bunch of little water droplets. They're not water droplets, but we might think of it that way, like some fog, where the fog is not really there, but yet it's there. We can see it, right? It's the same thing with these beings, that they're formless beings. They don't have physical form. These beings are experiencing exclusively pleasant feelings, that they don't experience painful feelings. They don't experience feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. So in terms of discontentedness, they only experience the pleasant feelings, conditional pleasant feelings, like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. But they don't experience anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety. They don't experience any of that. They don't experience things like shyness, right? This is a neither painful nor pleasant feeling. So in this heavenly realm, these beings are in the cycle of rebirth. It's not a permanent existence in the heavenly realm. You can see the world around you is constantly changing. This is the universal truth of impermanence, that things are constantly changing. But yet some people think that this realm is permanent, but it's not. The Buddha never taught that this realm is permanent, but yet many people have this belief. But you need to be able to independently verify and see for yourself that in the world around you, everything is constantly changing, right? This is a universal truth. This is how the world is constructed, that it's full of impermanence. We started with a certain number of people in the class, right? And people are starting to leave. Some people, right? That's change. That's all that is. Maybe they're hungry. Maybe they can't sit on the floor. Maybe they're uncomfortable, right? This is just change that is happening. And now maybe later there'll be some more new people that come in. There's constant change in the world, right? Things are going to be constantly changing. So in this heavenly realm, beings are moving in and out of that realm all the time. It's not a permanent existence. They're in the cycle of rebirth, and they still need to be able to get out of that cycle of rebirth. Because if they don't get to enlightenment in that heavenly existence, they will be reborn into another existence in either the hell realm, the animal realm, the afflicted spirit realm, or the human realm. And they can also be reborn back into the heavenly realm as well, right? So these beings can move in and out of these realms. The beings in the heavenly realm tend to lack motivation to be able to make their way to enlightenment because they're experiencing exclusively pleasant feelings. They don't have the built-in motivation that human beings have. In the human realm, we have painful feelings and we experience neither painful nor pleasant feelings. So we tend to have built-in motivation that we're interested in getting rid of those painful feelings and the feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. So we tend to be very motivated to be able to get to enlightenment. Where the beings in the heavenly realm, they don't have that because they only experience pleasant feelings. So they tend to be complacent and lack motivation to be able to make their way to enlightenment. Then we've got the human realm, which you guys are much more familiar with than in probably any of these other realms because you're in a human existence now. In a human existence, we have physical form and we experience pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant feelings. This is the ideal existence because we tend to have built-in motivation that makes us interested to be able to get to enlightenment. And now we make our way towards enlightenment, and you can actually escape this cycle of rebirth from the human existence. This human existence is also not permanent, just like in the heavenly realm. It's not permanent. We were born, so therefore we will die. Whatever arises is going to change and it's going to fade away and no longer exist. Just like the heavenly realm, we are impermanent. So in this human realm, we have the ability to cultivate our consciousness, but even in the human realm with the painful feelings and the neither painful nor pleasant feelings, there tends to be a high degree of complacency or lack of motivation, that oftentimes people are uninterested to be able to learn and grow and develop and make their way to this enlightened mental state because the mind's holding on to this darkness, to the pleasures that one experiences. The mind is holding on and doesn't really want to put in the true work and effort to make improvement in one's day-to-day life. So as painful as the misery and the grief and the sorrow and the sadness is, even when an individual is presented with the solution and the escape from that, oftentimes people lack motivation to make their way towards that. This is why people won't necessarily come to the temple, or they won't necessarily meditate, or they won't pick up a book and they won't read a book, or they won't consult with a teacher. They'll be unmotivated to do it. They just kind of stay in the misery. It's kind of like staying in dirty bath water. An individual's like, I really don't want to get out. It's too much work. I'm just going to stay in this dirty bath water, right? So an individual in the human realm has the ability to get to enlightenment, but oftentimes they even lack motivation, encouragement, even with those painful feelings that are there. But they're more likely than a heavenly being to be able to learn and grow and develop. This is the ideal existence in the human realm. And the Buddha encourages you not to let it go to waste, to learn and grow and develop on this path, that you can actually make your way to this enlightened mental state. And you can see that that is occurring because as you're progressing on this path, the mind's becoming more and more peaceful, more and more joyful, and your relationships are really improving. And what you're experiencing in day-to-day life is really improving, and you can know that this improvement is occurring. So in this human realm, we have the ability to cultivate our consciousness, although certain individuals don't, but you have that ability, and you can make your way to this enlightened mental state. And you can use that built-in motivation of the painful feelings and the neither painful nor pleasant feelings to help motivate you to continue to walk towards the enlightened mental state. Then there's the afflicted spirit realm. We might refer to this as ghost. Again, these beings are formless. They don't have physical form. They don't have the ability to get to enlightenment from that existence. These beings tend to have a certain amount of craving, desire, attachment to people, places, relationships. They hold on. This is the reason why people might say, my house is haunted, right? Maybe this person lived there in the past, they died, and now they're holding on and they're not willing to let go. Or someone might hold on to a relationship. When someone dies, they might be reborn into this afflicted spirit realm or this ghost realm, and now they're hanging out around this human being who they used to spend time with in the past. Their mind's not comfortable to just move on, getting rid of that craving, desire, attachment. So beings in this afflicted spirit realm, they will experience painful feelings and feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. They don't experience any pleasant feelings. They don't have any happiness or excitement or elation or thrill or euphoria in that realm. It's only the painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and others, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, as well as the neither painful nor pleasant feelings like shyness. An afflicted spirit can be shy, right? So this afflicted spirit realm is not where you would be interested to be able to be. They can't cultivate their consciousness to escape out of the cycle of rebirth from that existence, but they can get into a human existence or into a heavenly existence and escape the cycle of rebirth from there. So this is not where you would like to be. These beings tend to have craving to people, places, and possessions. Then there's the animal realm, which you might also be familiar with because we interact with animals quite a bit, right? They have physical form, right? Just like human beings, they're in the they have a physical body. They experience all three feelings, just like human beings. They experience pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant feelings. And they can cultivate their consciousness, but not to the level of enlightenment. And typically when they're cultivating their consciousness, there's usually a human being involved helping them to be able to do that, where they can learn how to become more loving and kind and warm and gentle. But left to their own devices, they won't typically cultivate their consciousness to be able to become more loving and kind and warm and gentle. But if they do so, then they have the ability to move further into other existences. Once you're in the animal realm, it's almost like a prison where it's very challenging to escape out of it. An individual that's in the animal realm, they will get out of that animal realm, but they tend to bounce around quite a bit in the animal realm before they make their way out of it. Because in the animal realm, we typically do things like kill and steal. We have sexual misconduct and things like this where we have sex with lots of different beings, right? We're not content in the animal realm. We don't have the wisdom to understand how unwise these things are. And oftentimes we're even killing just to survive, that we need to kill other beings in order to eat these beings in order to survive. So once you're in the animal existences, it's very challenging to get out because there's these things that are going on. The mind is polluted and it's continuing to kill, to steal, and have sexual misconduct. But there are animals that don't necessarily do those kinds of things. There's some animals that are very loyal to their partner, or there's some animals that don't eat other animals, that they just eat plants. There's some animals that will just have one sexual partner throughout their entire existence. So as an animal bounces around from existence to existence, their mind is improving, and it can help them to be able to get to a better existence, like a human existence. So like, for example, if there was a lion or a tiger or a snake or something like this, it would be very challenging for that being to make its way into the human realm. It's possible, but it's very challenging. More likely than not, they'll bounce around a lot of times in that animal realm, maybe eventually making their way towards a rabbit or a turtle or an elephant. And now in those existences, there's more love and compassion and gentleness in the mind. They're not killing other beings. So those beings will have more of a likelihood to come into a human existence than something like a lion or a tiger or a snake or something like this. So in this animal existence, they're basically operating on survival instincts. They're just trying to survive. They don't really focus on the cultivation of wisdom. They're just making decisions based in their own survival. And they will tend to kill, steal, have sexual misconduct. They will fight. They will play, things like this. They're not sitting around meditating, listening to a teacher talk about the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path and the natural law of Gotama and things of that nature. They're just out there trying to survive. And this is one of the reasons why they have such a shortened lifespan, is because they're killing so much in order to be able to survive. We're human beings, we tend to live longer lifespans because we're not having as much craving, anger, and ignorance as like an animal. But an animal like a lion or a tiger, they usually live for about 8 to 12 years. Or a snake, they live up to a maximum of about 20 years because they're killing so much. They have a certain amount of craving in their mind and they have a very shortened lifespan. So this animal existence is not ideal. This isn't where you would like to be. But even those animals will eventually make their way out of that realm because that's an impermanent existence too. Just like the afflicted spirits and all these other realms, they are all impermanent. They are not permanent existences. And then there's the realm of hell. These beings are also formless beings, just like afflicted spirits in the heavenly realm. They are experiencing exclusively painful feelings. They don't have any pleasant feelings in the hell realm, and there's neither painful nor pleasant feelings. It's just the painful feelings. These beings are experiencing excruciating amounts of pain and misery. And the reason why an individual will be reborn in this realm is because of their craving, their anger, and their ignorance. The more polluted that the mind is, it will be reborn into this hell realm. And now this individual is extinguishing its unwholesome karma from its other existences. That part of getting to the point where it's extinguishing the unwholesome results of its decisions is to be in this realm where it can now experience the things that it needs to experience in order to now be able to leave out of that realm and experience other existences. In the hell realm, they can't get to enlightenment. They're not able to cultivate their mind enough. They're essentially just burning off a certain amount of their unwholesome karma so that they can make their way into these other realms and then have a better and better improved chance to be able to get to enlightenment someday. So these beings in the hell realm, again, they're in the same time and space as us, right? They're not in deep down into the core of the earth or anything like this. So these beings are experiencing exclusively painful feelings. It's not where you would be interested to be, but there's the potential that we've been there in the past at some point, right? But now you're in this human existence. So these are the 5 realms, and this is what individuals will experience in these 5 realms. And it's these pollutions that I was talking about earlier of craving, anger, and ignorance that is going to determine what realm you're reborn into. That at the time of death, whatever the status of the mind is, that's what's going to determine what realm and what type of existence you have in that realm. So there's no being who's overlooking what we experience during our life and then deciding where we go at the end of our life. It's our own decisions that determine where it is that we end up at the end of this life. If we get to enlightenment at the end of this life, or prior to the end of this life, we've escaped the cycle of rebirth. We're no longer in that cycle of rebirth. Our mind is completely peaceful and joyful. You'll see for a year, 2 years, 3 years, you have no anger, you have no sadness, no frustration, none of these discontent feelings, and you know your mind's enlightened and you've escaped out of this cycle of rebirth. And the Buddha doesn't declare what comes next for that individual. He leaves it as an undeclared teaching. But for an individual who's unenlightened and they die, whatever the pollution is in their mind, whatever the level of pollution that is in the mind, that's what's going to determine which one of these realms that an individual is going to be reborn into. If there's heavy, deep amount of pollution in the mind, that's where an individual is going to be reborn in the hell realm. If there's a little bit less than that, then there's the animal existences. A little bit less than that, there's the afflicted spirit realm. And then less than that human realm. And then if the mind has very minimal amount of pollution, it can go into the heavenly realm. But then these beings can be reborn in and out of these realms at any time. If you're in the heavenly realm, you can be reborn down into the hell realm. It's possible for that to occur. It's rare, but it does occur. You can also go from the hell realm all the way back up to the heavenly realm. Just in one existence, you can move from this hell realm right up to the heavenly realm. This is possible. Again, it's very rare, but it's possible. So there's not like a hierarchy here or a ladder that you're climbing. Beings are moving in and out of all these realms at different times based on the level of pollution in the mind. When you're in the human realm, you're becoming a better and better human being if you're on the path to enlightenment. And that's why if you get to that first stage of enlightenment, for those of you guys that have studied this, if you get to that first stage of enlightenment, you're reborn back into the human realm. Or if you get to that second stage of enlightenment, you're reborn back into the human realm. You've escaped the lower realms. You're no longer being reborn in the lower realms because you've become a better and better human being. You've shed a certain amount of your animalistic instincts. So I'm going to pause here before I go on, and I'm going to talk more about shedding these animalistic instincts. But I'd like to see if you guys have any questions on the 5 realms before we go any further. If you have a question, we have microphones over here in the white bowl at the temple. If you just get a microphone, press the gray button. The lights are going to come on. You can hold it up to your chin, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online as well. And then you can keep these microphones with you because you might have more than one question, or someone around you might have a question, and you can just share the microphone with them. And then when you're not using it, if you could just turn it off, that way we won't get feedback through the speakers. And then for anybody who's online, if you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and you have a question, you can put that into the comment section and I'll be able to see it. Or if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and then you can ask any and all questions that you like that way. So it looks like you have a question.
Yes. Hello. How do you move through the different realms that don't have form if you don't have like a physical body to die and be born into? Like, how do you move, from hell into heavenly realm without a form that passes?
Sure. So in those formless realms, they have a set lifespan. So when you come into that realm, there's a definitive time frame of how long your life is going to be in that existence. Like, for example, in the heavenly realm, the Buddha talks about these beings as having eons of lifespan. It's a lot longer than a human being. The way that he used the word eon is it's essentially like a undeterminable amount of time. It's an immeasurable amount of time. The highest number that they could count to 2,500 years ago was the 100,000th place. They didn't have the word for million, right? We have million, billion, trillion. We have so many different numbers now, but the highest they could count to was 100,000. So anything beyond that, the Buddha would refer to as an eon, an immeasurable amount of time. So he talks about some of these heavenly beings as having, multiple eons, even upwards of 500 eons of time. Same thing for the hell beings. He talks about existence in the hell realm in terms of eons sometimes. So it's a set determined amount of time based on your previous existences and what the level of your pollution is. When you come into that realm, now you have a set time frame. And now these beings' time is going to expire. And at the end of that particular existence, whatever the status of their pollution of their mind, that's what's going to determine their rebirth into their next life. And when we talk about it as rebirth, it's important to understand that during the lifetime of the Buddha, or at least what's documented in the Pali Canon, there's this word samsara that's being used. That's the word that's used in the original source text. We tend to translate that as the cycle of rebirth. But a better way to refer to this is the cycle of new existence, because there actually isn't anything that's being reborn. It's not like you're the same being as you were in the past. There's a completely new body and there's a completely new mind. It's a completely new being, but there's this spark that creates this new mind. So for example, if we have a fire that's burning and there's logs on this fire, this is the fuel. And now, as long as this fire has fuel, it's going to send off sparks and it's going to be carried by the wind. And when that spark lands, it's going to ignite a new fire. It's not the same fire. It's a completely different fire, but it came from the spark of the previous fire, that this previous fire had fuel, so therefore it sent off a spark, and now it's got a brand new fire. It's the same thing that is true. That's why we refer to these three poisons or three unwholesome roots or three fires, that this craving, anger, and ignorance in your mind, you know that when your anger is arising, you feel heat in your face and pressure in your skull. That's the fire of anger burning. So as long as there's fire in the mind, that means there's fuel there. The craving is the fuel. And as long as there's fuel, it's going to send off sparks, and now it's going to ignite a new life, that there's going to be this new mind that is created. And now if there's this new mind, it's going to need to find a new body. For example, of a human being, it's going to need to find a new body. So while we call it the cycle of rebirth, and beings are moving in and out of these realms at all these different ways that I was describing, it's really better to think of this as the cycle of new existence, because it's a new body and a new mind that come together for this existence. And in the case of formless beings, there wouldn't be any physical form. It would just be the consciousness or the mind. But those beings do have this formless existence where it's almost like an apparition, that some people can actually see these beings. Yep. Okay, let me know if you guys have any other questions. Yeah, Steve.
Thank you, David. You've taught just recently that we definitely have free will in the human realm. Mm-hmm. What about in these other realms? Do they have degrees of free will or no free will? Or
every being in the cycle of rebirth has free will. Everything's based on free will, that we have the ability to make whatever decisions that we make. But because of the pollutions in the mind, an individual will be motivated to make certain wise decisions or unwise decisions based on the level of pollution that's in their mind. And that's why by decreasing the pollutions in the mind and increasing what we call the wholesome roots, you'll make wiser and wiser decisions. And it's all based in free will. So that's why you can see that there's no being that's sending us to a good place or a bad place like some people teach. Instead, it's our own decisions that are leading to any particular result. Sometimes people think that we're being punished for something that we've done, where in reality, we're kind of punishing ourselves in the unenlightened state because of our pollution and our lack of motivation to be able to learn and grow and develop and purify the mind. Those pollutions continue to stay in the mind. And now with our free will, we make decisions through those pollutions that then produce unwholesome results. And now we experience those unwholesome results coming back to us. But when you get rid of all of that and you have more and more purity in your mind, now you're making wiser and wiser decisions, and you experience more and more wholesome results in your day-to-day life. Mm-hmm. All based in free will. Yep. Yes, sir. Looks like someone's going to get you a mic. Mm-hmm. I think it's not turned on.
Is it on? Oh, okay. Yeah, it's on. Yeah, thank you. Well, this is the first time I learned like a Buddha wisdom in English. I learned a bit like in Chinese before, and you just mentioned like is don't like just believe it, but you should validate yourself, mm-hmm. right? And you also mentioned that like after you get like enlightenment, then you will see like a potential like the past life or stuff so that you can validate. But like before we get enlightenment, how we validate like all the like logic or like all the concept here, like the rebirth or cycle stuff, so that we have.
Yeah, your mic went out, but I understood you. So it's not that when you get to enlightenment that you will see your past lives. If you were going to see your past lives, it would be in the process of making your way towards enlightenment. So one of the ways you might think about it, and I'll show it to you here, is that, you know, when you're in the unenlightened state and the mind's polluted and you haven't been training your mind, it's like walking out on the street And now you can just basically see the street that you're on, right? When your mind has these pollutions heavily in your mind, all you can see is the life that you're currently in. That's all you can see. But as you start training your mind and you're moving to this higher consciousness, you're getting rid of the pollution out of your mind and you're moving to this higher consciousness. It's like moving to a higher vantage point. And now when you're at this higher vantage point, you can see all these different streets and how they interconnect with each other. You can even see how one town connects to the other because you're at this higher vantage point. And this is what's happening in your journey to enlightenment, that as you're making your way to enlightenment, the pollution is gradually diminishing out of your mind. The wholesome qualities are increasing more and more and more, and it's moving to this higher vantage point that now you can oversee more, you can understand more what's going on in this life and why you're experiencing what you're experiencing in this life. But you can also sometimes see past lives too, and you can start having vivid memories. So in volume 11, chapter 105, if you'd like to see it, it's back there on the shelf. You can download it from our website. I put 17 different criteria of how to independently verify the cycle of rebirth. And that's what somebody would do in their journey to enlightenment, not when they actually get to enlightenment itself. So I don't have time to go through all 17, but they're in that book and you'd be able to see them. But it's not something that you're going to be able to read today and immediately independently verify it, right? Because there's certain experiences and certain teachings that you need to learn too. Like, for example, there's a teaching called dependent origination. This is the highest, most ultimate truth of the Buddha. You would need to learn that first, and that's going to help you to be able to see this cycle of rebirth very clearly. The dependent origination is in volume 5 of the book series. So that's why by volume 11, somebody has gradually made their way to independently verifying each one of these teachings that is being shared with them, that by the time you get to volume 11, you're now prepared to be able to independently verify the cycle of rebirth. So this is something that you would like to do long before you get to enlightenment. You actually wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment without having investigated the cycle of rebirth and know it to be true. Mm-hmm. Yep, you're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
I have several questions. Mm-hmm. The first one is only someone who gets the enlightenment can go to the heavenly realm?
If the mind is enlightened, you wouldn't go to the heavenly realm. That's not the ultimate goal. The Buddha's ultimate goal is to help you get to enlightenment in this existence. And if you get to enlightenment in this existence, your mind will be completely peaceful and joyful, experiencing all those qualities that I talked about, like the focus, concentration, clarity, deep memory, and all these other things. And having got to enlightenment, you're not going to be reborn in any of these realms. You will have escaped out of that cycle of rebirth. So the goal of the teachings of the Buddha isn't to get to heaven. If you've learned this in other places, this isn't what the Buddha taught. And I can show you his exact words on this so you can see that that's not what he actually taught. But instead, he's guiding you to get to this enlightened mental state. Once you get to enlightenment and you die, the Buddha leaves this as an undeclared teachings. You know, he's taught many different things during his life, and it's assembled in what's called the Pali Canon. This is 45 volumes of books that are about this thick. And this is the largest, most complete collection we have of his teachings, but it's not everything. But in this Pali Canon, he has this one discourse where he says, remember what I teach. I taught this. And he points to something that he taught, which is the Four Noble Truths. And he says, remember what I did not teach. I did not teach this. And he gives 10 different things that he didn't teach. And one of those things is what happens after death for an enlightened being. And I say that he didn't teach this wisely. He didn't declare what comes next for an enlightened being, because what you need to be able to get to in order to get to enlightenment is where your mind's completely peaceful and joyful now in the present moment. That if your mind's longing, yearning for something after this life, your mind's not content in the present moment, that your mind's still longing, yearning for something after this. So he didn't teach you to long and yearn for an afterlife. He taught you to be able to get to enlightenment in this life where your mind's completely peaceful and joyful. In terms of how you get into the heavenly realm, there's multiple ways to do that. One way is getting to what's called the third stage of enlightenment. This is what we refer to as a non-returner, that if you get to the third stage of enlightenment, which the mind's actually enlightened when you get to the fourth stage, but if you get to the third stage of enlightenment, you would be reborn into the heavenly realm and you would get to enlightenment from that existence. But that's not the only way to get to the heavenly realm, that some beings can get into the heavenly realm in other ways too. And then once in the heavenly realm, they still need to be able to make their way to enlightenment. But an enlightened being isn't reborn in the cycle of rebirth anywhere at all. You just need to turn on your mic again. The batteries might be dead because they're impermanent. There you go.
Okay, so that means Buddha is in none of this realm, and is Buddha gets the enlightenment?
Correct. The Buddha never declared that he was going to exist after this life. This is one of the things, I think you're probably from China, right? The Buddhism that they teach in China is not based on the Buddha's original teachings and his original words. That there's some people that say that the Buddha exists in the heavenly realm and your goal is to be able to get to the heavenly realm and all these kinds of things. This isn't what the Buddha taught whatsoever. And you can see this to be true if you study his original teachings and then you don't believe those teachings. You independently verify them for yourself. So the Buddha never declared that he existed after this life. He also didn't declare that he doesn't exist either. He just left it as an undeclared teaching. He says, I'm not going to declare whether I exist, whether I don't exist, whether I exist and don't exist. He went through all these different scenarios and said, I'm not going to declare any of these things. So your goal isn't to die and go to heaven and be with the Buddha. That's not what this is all about. This is about you learning and growing and developing, purifying your mind, getting to the point where you're living the ideal life and you're completely peaceful and joyful in your present existence. The Buddha died. He did not come back into the world through any of the five realms that I just described. He completely escaped out of that.
Enlightenment. What's the meaning of the Buddha's life? Is that let more people get the enlightenment?
Yeah. So what a Buddha is they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people. And countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. And this is very rare in the world, that for a Buddha to exist is very rare. The last one that the world currently is aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. So the purpose of his life in that particular life was he got to enlightenment by himself. He helped countless people get to enlightenment. Then he preserved his teachings so that other people could get to enlightenment after his death. But he's never coming back to this world ever again because he's escaped the cycle of rebirth. And it's important to understand, because I'm not sure if you were exposed to this, that not everybody is a Buddha. Sometimes people are taught that everybody is a Buddha. The Buddha never taught that. That's people today that are describing that. But the Buddha described how rare it is that a Buddha exists in the world. So his purpose, his goal, his objective was to share with people what it takes to get to this enlightened mental state. And then it was up to each individual to decide for themselves if they would like to get to that enlightened mental state. So he wasn't trying to convince people or pressure people or coerce people to do things any particular way. He already figured out how to get to peace and joy. And then he was just making himself available for the rest of his life for other people to be able to figure out how to do that too. And he was just sharing what it took for him to get to that enlightened mental state so that other people could also learn and grow and develop and get to that same enlightened mental state as well. Mm-hmm. If you could turn on the mic so that people online can, there you go.
Yeah. Why it's worthy for people to spend their
Okay, so I'll just repeat your question so that people online can hear. She asked, what is the purpose of chasing after enlightenment for your entire life if there's no guarantee of what's going to happen after this, is essentially what you're saying, right? Okay, so first off, you're not chasing enlightenment. If you chase enlightenment, you will never get to enlightenment, because that's the craving, desire, attachment. That's the longing, yearning that the mind is experiencing, right? But also, if you are all the way on the other side, where you are unmotivated to be able to learn and grow and develop in this life, you're not going to get to enlightenment there either. So you can't chase it, and you can't be dull and lethargic and lazy. You need to come to the middle, where you're gradually pursuing it as a goal, objective, or interest. The path to enlightenment isn't about what comes next. That's not what the Buddha is guiding you to do. It's not about believing a bunch of things or chasing after something and then hoping something good happens for you later. It's about getting to peace and joy now in this life, so that if you get to enlightenment in this life, you'll be living the ideal life. You will enjoy every single aspect of your life. You won't experience any misery or despair any longer in your current life. So the goal of this path isn't to work really hard for the rest of your life and then hope something good happens when you die. That's not what the Buddha's guiding you to. He's guiding you to get to peace and joy now in this life. But you can't chase it. You can't long and yearn for it. You need to be able to make wise decisions to gradually work towards it. And the reason why this is so beneficial for you is because you won't experience any anger, sadness, frustration. You'll experience the complete peace and joy. Your mind will be focused and concentrated. It's kind of like, if you climb a mountain, when you're standing at the bottom of the mountain looks very tall, right? But if you just focus on one step at a time, next thing you know, you're halfway up the mountain. And eventually you're going to get all the way to the top of the mountain. Well, if you were hiking in a mountain, when you get to the top of the mountain, it's a beautiful view and it's such fresh air and it's so wonderful. But the thing about hiking is you got to come back down off the mountain, right? And now you go back to whatever you're doing. Getting to the point where the mind's enlightened, it's a permanent mental state. You need to walk up this mountain, but you don't come back down. By the time you get to enlightenment, your mind's permanently in that mental state of enlightenment where the mind's completely peaceful and joyful. And now you'll live that way for the rest of this life, that you'll get to enjoy having harmonious relationships. You'll have enjoyment in all the different experiences that you're having on a day-to-day basis. You won't experience the difficulties and struggles and misery of life any longer. So that's what an individual is working towards on the path to enlightenment. And it took the Buddha 6 years to be able to get to that. So it's going to take you some time. It's not an instantaneous thing. But as you're making your way gradually towards enlightenment, you can see that your mind is improving, because you'll see that the pollution is coming out, and you're seeing situations where you're once angry and frustrated and bitter and hostile and harsh, that your mind doesn't do that anymore. And you'll know that it's these teachings that are leading to that. Because when you're bitter and harsh and hostile to people, that all comes back to you. But when you start being loving and kind and warm and gentle and compassionate and friendly with people, and you train your mind to be able to do that in all situations, more and more, that's what's going to be coming back to you. So the Buddha taught this better way of life, right? He's not teaching you a religion. He's not teaching you rules or commandments. He's not trying to force you or guilt or shame you to do any particular thing. He's just saying, hey, if you would like to live this better way of life, of being peaceful and joyful all the time, where your mind's cheerful and bright and uplifted, you can have harmonious relationships with everybody, here's how to do it. And if you'd like to do it, then you can see that your mind is making your way towards that. But it's not about what's going to happen after this life. The Buddha left that as an undeclared teaching wisely, because by the time you get to enlightenment, if there is something next, then the Buddha didn't say that there is, but let's just say if there is something next, it's either as good as what you're currently experiencing or better, right? But by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind's so peaceful and joyful in the present moment, you're not going to care what's next. If there's anything next at all, it doesn't matter, because your mind is so peaceful and so joyful now. I'm completely content in the present moment. So therefore your mind's not longing, yearning for what's next. That's usually what people are taught, is to long and yearn for what's next. But that's not what the Buddha taught. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. Just look online here, see if we have any other questions. All right, I don't see any other questions anywhere. Okay, so I've described this of how an individual is moving to a higher consciousness, and they can oftentimes see more and more of their current life and their previous lives too. And the way that that's working is that you're eliminating more and more of the pollution of the mind, and that's what's helping you to move to that higher consciousness. And now you can see more of your current life and your potentially your previous lives too. And this will be a direct way for you to independently verify the cycle of rebirth. But in that book that I keep referencing, volume 11, chapter 105, there's those 17 different criteria. And just one of those 17 is that you observe your past lives, right? And this is where some people know with 100% certainty that the cycle of rebirth is true. But there's these other ways as well. It's not just that way, because not everybody is going to be able to observe their past lives. It doesn't happen for everybody. But that's what you're experiencing potentially as you're moving to this higher and higher consciousness. And what you're doing in order to move to that higher and higher consciousness is you're shedding your animalistic instincts, becoming a better and better human being. So the vast majority of rebirths into the human realm, they occur out of the animal realm. This is why some beings coming into the human realm, they might murder, right? Because maybe they were a lion or a tiger in the past life, and now they come into this human existence, and now that person might still have that craving to kill other beings. Where some beings in the human realm have actually come out of the heavenly realm as well, or some of them were in the human realm and they're being reborn. But a lot of the beings that are in the human realm have come from our animal existences, and now we function very much like an animal in the unenlightened human state. The unenlightened human mind functions like an animal. Like an animal lacks memory. It also really likes a praise and reward system, right? This is the way human beings function. You go to school, you get a certificate, you're very happy by that, and now you want to repeat it. You want to do it again. An animal does the same thing. If you teach an animal a certain behavior and you give it a reward, it'll tend to repeat that same thing over and over. A human being is the same way. If your parents say to you, wow, good boy, good girl, you did a good job, you're like, wow, I feel good, right? It's just like that animal having that praise and reward system. If your boss tells you, wow, you did a great job, I'm going to give you a little bit extra money now. Here's your bonus for that great project that you did. Wow, now you're going to do that job again, even better. Just like an animal can be trained to do certain behaviors, a human being functions like that in the unenlightened state through this praise and reward system. Just like an animal, we learn from a pack of like species. A monkey learns how to be monkeys from other monkeys. A snake learns how to be a snake from other snakes. A lion learns how to be a lion from other lions. Human beings learn how to be human from other human beings. So if you grew up in a household where there was bitterness and harshness and hostility in your day-to-day life, you grew up with seeing that, and that's how you started to function as a human being, thinking that that was the way to function as a human being. But if you grew up in a more jovial, more pleasant home environment, then you grew up and your mind was thinking in different ways, right? So we grew up learning from the people around us. So depending on who we were around in terms of our parents, our brothers and sisters, our friends, our aunts and uncles, our grandparents, we grew up learning from other beings, just like animals learn from other beings as well. We even have phrases. We will say, like if somebody's being really bitter and harsh and hostile, we'll say, you are acting like an animal, right? This is something we say in the human realm. Or we might say, you are fighting like cats and dogs. This is us human beings recognizing animalistic behavior in another human being. And we call it that. We'll say you're acting like an animal, or you're fighting like cats and dogs. So even though people don't understand maybe what I've presented prior to coming here and learning what I'm sharing with you, we're already saying it. We're already talking this way, because even with somebody not having this wisdom, they understand it to a certain degree, right? This is the way the human mind functions, is that the individual can identify animalistic behavior in another human being. Humans are fascinated with animals because we've been in so many different animal existences in the past. We do things like study animals. We have scientists that are constantly studying animals. We have zoos that inhabit animals and we go look at animals. We look at books and stories that have animals as the main character. We have stuffed animals when we were children, and we find this to be very pleasurable to have all these stuffed animals around. We even wear animal prints as clothing, right? And that's something that human beings do. We even have pets, and we invite them into our home and into our bed, and we might sleep with animals, right? Because human beings, our mind has been conditioned over so many animalistic existences that our mind has this fascination with animals because of our past existences in the human realm. So what we're doing on this path to enlightenment is we're shedding these animalistic instincts, becoming a better and better human being. Because as long as we're fighting like cats and dogs, or we're acting like animals, then that means that when we die in this life, we're going to be reborn back into the animal realm, or maybe into the hell realm or the afflicted spirit realm. And that's not where an individual would be interested to go. Instead, you would like to become a better and better human being, ultimately getting to the peace and joy that you can experience in this life. So when the Buddha teaches you things like right speech and how to eliminate your harsh speech and to speak gently, right? This is something we can learn how to do in the human realm, is we can learn how to speak gently to each other. But when you have craving in your mind and you're not getting what you want, your anger will arise, and now you will be bitter and harsh and hostile. You will be vindictive towards other people. You will vent your anger at other people through your speech. This is your animalistic instinct, that your mind's not getting what you want. That lion, that tiger, that bear is not getting what it wants. That dog is not getting what it wants, so it's going to bark at other beings. And that's what you're doing as a human being in the unenlightened state, is you're barking, you're growling and roaring at this other being. And you need to be able to identify this as an animalistic behavior, because what you're looking to do is you're looking to shed that and gain wisdom to realize that you can be a better and better human being. You can speak gently to other beings. And you need to be able to learn how to do this through things like the right speech of the Eightfold Path. You need to be able to learn meditation, to be able to train your mind to eliminate your craving and anger so that you're no longer speaking bitter and harsh and hostile with the people around you. And this is you becoming a better and better human being. We can get to the point where we're not interested in killing. Many of you guys are already there, right? Probably you don't have any interest in killing another being. You've shed that part of your animalistic instincts. And maybe you don't steal anymore, right? Maybe you're not stealing. Maybe you've realized that that's unwise, because we probably did that when we were a kid, but now we realize how unwise that is. So you've shed those things. But are you practicing sexual misconduct? Are you going out and having sex with lots and lots and lots and lots of beings, right? Because that's an animalistic behavior. Going out and having sex with lots and lots and lots and lots of people, it's going to produce unwholesome results for you. That's where you get sexually transmitted diseases. That's where you get in fights. That's where you can get murdered. You can get beat up. You can have your property destroyed. You can lose your material wealth. These are all things that can happen as a cause and effect, right? This is the natural law that the Buddha is teaching you. He's not giving you any rules or commandments. He's helping you to be able to see that when you function like an animal through craving, anger, and ignorance, it's going to produce unwholesome results in your day-to-day life. So you need to be able to look at the things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis and ask yourself, is this an animalistic behavior? Are you learning and growing and developing and becoming a better and better human being? Because that's what the Buddha is guiding you to be able to do. And you can experience that improvement in your day-to-day life. So when you're getting ready to be harsh and bitter and hostile to your mom or your dad or your brothers or sisters or people like this, realize that you're about to growl and roar like an animal, and you'd like to restrain your mind and pull that back. Don't allow your mind to do that. That you are interested in being a better and better human being. And maybe what you do is you say, hey, Mom, I'm so sorry. I need to go. I'll talk later. Or I'll call you back another time, right? And now you say goodbye in a loving way instead of being bitter and harsh and hostile, because that bitterness and harshness and hostility isn't helping you in your relationships. So this path to enlightenment is to shed these animalistic instincts. And there's many things that your mind is doing in terms of not only being bitter and harsh and hostile, but even that conceit that we talked about, where the mind is putting itself in this pecking order and trying to determine if you're above people or below people. This is also something that you need to shed. So where you see yourself judging other people and looking down on people, you need to train your mind to cut that off and don't allow your mind to do that. And that's where the meditations and all the other training that the Buddha is guiding you to be able to understand is going to help you to be able to do that. Because just hearing me share these things with you, intellectually, you can understand, like, yeah, I'm not interested in judging other people. I'm not interested in looking down on them. But when you go out into the world and you start interacting with your coworkers and your neighbors and people like this, your friends and your family, now your mind's doing that. And you need to be able to spot that that's what your mind's doing, that it's doing something very animalistic, which is judging people and measuring and comparing them. And now you need to be able to cut that off and let it go. And that's what the meditations and the generosity and all the other things that the Buddha teaches you is going to help you to learn how to let this stuff go. Okay? So this animal consciousness is preoccupied with craving, anger, and ignorance, the ego in a protection of the self. But getting to enlightenment is to shed all of that. And the Buddha gives you the tools of how to do that. So do you guys have any questions? This is everything that I have to share with you guys. If you have questions, remember you guys can use the mics here online. You can put this into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. It looks like Joycelyn might have a question.
Yes, I have a question. Yes. Okay, in the animal consciousness, animal realm, for a being to move out of the animal realm, does it have to have interaction with beings that are human?
It doesn't have to, but being around human beings, it has surely helped animals a lot. So, for example, if you have a wild, I don't know what they call them, packs or troops of monkeys, right? If you have a bunch of apes or gorillas or monkeys out in the forest, there's going to be some of those monkeys and gorillas and apes that are like really angry and bitter and hostile and harsh. They tend to be aggressive and hostile. But there's going to be some of them that are a little bit more loving and kind, a little bit more warm and gentle, even picking insects off of each other's body and getting rid of them, right? They're going to be even practicing a bit of generosity. So they're going to be able to cultivate their consciousness a little bit, but not as much as when they're around human beings. Like when we have these animals that are domesticated, like cats and dogs and more animals that are starting to be domesticated, this is one of the reasons why we're seeing the explosion of our human realm. Our human realm is up to 8 billion beings at this point. At one time, it was a lot smaller, right? During the lifetime of the Buddha, it was only 100,000 beings. Well, scientists have, 100 million beings during the lifetime of the Buddha. Scientists have shared with us that out of all the animals that once existed in the world, only 1% of them still exist. So 99% of all animals are extinct. So that means the animal realm has been shrinking, right? Well, if what I'm sharing with you is true, that animals can't get to enlightenment and they're going to need to be reborn into another existence in order to be able to experience a better life and get to enlightenment. When we see the shrinking of the animal realm, we should see the expansion of another realm because they haven't escaped. And that's exactly what we see. This is part of the evidence that you can see that this cycle of rebirth is true. Because if the animal realm is shrinking and the human realm was also shrinking, then we can see that this is not true, right? But when we see the animal realm shrinking and we see the human realm expanding, that's exactly what we would suspect that would occur if this cycle of rebirth is true, that animals can't escape out of the cycle of rebirth. They're going to need to go somewhere. And where have they gone? Well, they've come into the human realm. So you can see these kinds of things that animals, they don't need to have interaction with humans in order to get to the human realm, but it surely helps them. So for example, over in Cambodia, there was this rat that was trained to find landmines. Human beings trained it to be able to find landmines. And as you might know, during the Vietnam War, they put a lot of landmines out, and a lot of civilians, even up to today, are stepping on these landmines, and they're dying, and they're having all kinds of difficulties. Well, they trained this rat, because it's very light, to go out into the field and find landmines. And it's been credited with finding over 100 landmines. And it's dead now. It actually died a couple years ago, but it lived for about 6 years or 8 years or however long it lived. This was all through human interaction, but it was practicing generosity. It was practicing loving kindness. It was practicing compassion for other beings, but it wouldn't have done that by itself. That rat left to its own devices would have just been a rat. But because it had involvement from humans, I suspect that rat was probably born into the human realm or into the heavenly realm as it's part of its next birth. But it was from this interaction from human beings. But animals can evolve, but just not at the same pace as if they were involved with human beings. Because us human beings, we have more wisdom about what is wise and what is unwise, and we can guide an animal better than if it was left to its own devices. You're welcome.
Right, Mr. David. So take an example of somebody who has schizophrenic. Would that be somebody who is like be in two worlds, in two realms?
This individual with schizophrenia, for those of you guys don't know, that these individuals tend to hear voices that other people don't hear. And they sometimes see things that other beings don't see, right? And what they're being told is that they're mentally ill, and that there's something wrong with them, and they have a defective brain. And then they're given medicine to be able to try to resolve that, but it never really does, because what they're really experiencing is they're experiencing these beings from other realms, that they're able to hear these voices. And not everybody can hear them, but they can actually hear them. And since they're being taught that there's something wrong with them, they start believing that. Where if they talk with someone like me, I would be able to help them to train their mind to get to the point where when they hear those voices, they can learn to ignore it. Just like you're sitting at a restaurant and 2 tables over, you can ignore that conversation of 2 human beings. You can also ignore this conversation with these hell beings, or these beings that are in the heavenly realm, or these afflicted spirits. You can ignore that. You can learn how to do that. But if you're being told that something's wrong with you and you have a defective brain and you need to take this medicine, you'll start believing that kind of thing. And now you'll think something's wrong with you, when in reality, it's just that your mind has the ability to hear these conversations from other realms. And in some cases, you can see things that other people don't see. In the medicine, what it's doing is it's taking the mind and kind of subduing it so that it has less of those things, but they still occur. A person who is experiencing what people refer to as schizophrenia, they never really fully eliminate their symptoms 100%, because their mind can still experience these things. It's just kind of subdued to a certain degree. But with training of the mind and understanding these things, you can get to a point where you ignore these kinds of things. You just understand, like, oh yeah, there's a hell being sitting right there in the corner. There's not, but let's just say there was. There's a hell being sitting right there in the corner. I'm not harming it. It's not going to harm me. I don't need to be worried about it. I don't need to be scared. I don't need to think that something's wrong with me. I can just see it, and I know other people can't see it, and that's okay. And now I can just move on with my day. Or, oh, there's a heavenly being. Okay, well, that's interesting, right? You don't need to be like, oh my goodness, there's a heavenly being. Wow, look at me. Look how special I am. Look how great I am. No, it's like, okay, well, there's a heavenly being. Just keep on walking. Just like there's a dog, there's a squirrel, there's a rabbit, there's a human being. Okay, just keep on walking. No big deal. But if you're not understanding these kinds of things, then people's minds become more and more deluded to the point where it thinks that there's something wrong. So it's not that they are necessarily between 2 worlds. They're in a human existence. It's just that their mind is opened up to a certain degree that they can see and hear things that other people can't see and hear. But if they learn the true understanding of what's truly going on in their mind, then they can come to a place where they're completely comfortable in the world, realizing that they have this ability that not everybody has, and now they can just navigate the world peacefully. But if they're being told that they're sick and they're ill and there's something wrong with them and you need to take this medicine, now there's going to be worry, anxiety, stress, guilt, shame, fear, and all these other things in the mind. And they have difficulties dealing with it because they don't understand it. Once you understand it, then you can more easily navigate the world with what's going on in your day-to-day life. Yep. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere else. So what I'm going to do is just end class by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for your interest to learn and understand the path to enlightenment. This is, again, not something that somebody would learn on a very first entrance into the teachings of the Buddha. But if this is your first time being here and your first time learning, I understand there's a lot of other teachings for you to be able to learn and understand first. This is just a light introduction to the cycle of rebirth and the 5 realms of existence. But if you'd really like to get on the path to enlightenment, there's core central teachings for you to be able to learn and get started with. And I can get you plugged into that through our book series, through our videos, through our podcasts, through our courses and retreats, and all these different things. And that's where I would recommend for people to start. So if you'd like to get plugged into that kind of stuff, you can come talk to me after class and I'll help you to get plugged into it. If you're interested in getting involved in some of the more learning events that are here, 6:30 this evening, I'm going to be teaching meditation over in the main hall. So if you're coming for the walking market, for the shopping, or if you'd like to come over in the main hall at 6:30 tonight, we're going to be doing meditation. And then what I do after meditation is I just open up to whatever questions you guys have. Any and all questions that you would like to ask, you can ask those. So if you'd like to come over for that, you can. Tonight at 9 p.m., I'm going to be teaching this same topic here in the classroom. So I teach it twice a day because I live stream it as well. Like right now, the people in Europe are sleeping. So when they start waking up this evening at 9 p.m., they'll be able to join a live class if they like. So no matter where you are in the world, there's a class available for you at either 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. You can attend live, or if you can't attend live, there's a recording on our YouTube channel, Facebook, our podcast. You'll be able to access these teachings that way too. And then next week, I'm starting a course called Experiencing the Jhanas in the 4 Stages of Enlightenment, where Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., I'm going to be teaching teachings that are going to help you to understand what are these jhanas. These are preliminary phases that the mind goes through in its experiencing enhanced qualities of mind. And then I'm going to be helping you to understand the 4 stages of enlightenment and how to move into these 4 stages of enlightenment where the mind's actually enlightened. So that's a course I'm going to be teaching next week. And all these things are available for you at no cost, whether it's classes, courses, retreats, books, audiobooks, videos, personal guidance, anything that you need in order to journey on the path to enlightenment. I just give it away to everybody at no cost because I'm very interested and motivated to see you get to this enlightened mental state. So if you'd like help, just reach out and I'm here to help you. So whatever you do today, have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Sawadee khap. Sawadee khap.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.